Sure. My name is Brendan Gordon. My current role is the Director of Business Development, and it's a dual role because I'm the lead innovation consultant for a consultancy agency based here in Limerick. I have two boys and a fiance, and last year, as the course is about to start, I was turning 40, and I had never been to university. I had no third level education, and I felt now was the time to tackle that bridge and get that academic chip off my shoulder. At the very beginning, ideally, I partnered with an organization called Employability Limerick. And when we were looking at what they were doing and how they were doing it, their focus started off being on the brand and awareness and communication and coming, a bit more dressed, appropriate to deal with the business private sector. So at the start, success for us would have been very much, how do we come to the party, dressed for the occasion, saying the right things, talking about outcomes from their perspective. But as the program evolved and I actually started to get into the research, we then looked at how the term people with disabilities was actually disabling them, and that we had to stop thinking about designing solutions for the disability and start thinking about designing opportunities for the person.
And Brendan, I've heard you speak about, the social model of disability and it being maybe a bit different to what you would have, or the way you'd have viewed disability before you undertook this project. Can you tell us a bit about that model?
So I came across this TED talk by a lady by the name of Stella Young. She's Australian, and she was talking about this topic known as inspiration porn, and it was the objectification of people with disabilities for those without. So we've all seen those, memes, a person running on prosthetic legs, what's your excuse is the tagline, or, a girl and she's painting a picture, but the brush is in her mouth because she doesn't have arms, what's your excuse, or just try. And as I was watching this, she touched on a topic called the social model of disability. And we have the medical model of disability, which was originated by the World Health Organization. And I noticed that the language was nuanced, but different enough that it mattered. So the social model of disability talks about how people are not disabled by their impairments or their diagnoses, but rather they're disabled by the environment around them. So let me give you an example. If you wanted to create a workshop for design thinking and the venue didn't have a ramp and there was a person that was participating in a wheelchair, that person has now been disabled by their environment rather than by their disability. So, and even the language that they use is nuanced in that it's disabled people. So it gets you to start a mindset change, a shift in how you think about things, rather than the old term of people with disabilities. Because if, like anything, if you're talking about such and such with this, you start to focus on the this rather than the person, and the solution and the design starts to stream towards that, as opposed to creating, an opportunity for everyone. And just one further example, and I won't take too long on it, but as I started to hone my research, and this is where ADR really started to come out and benefit me so much, was that what I learned was that in semester one, we were all about action and design. And the research did come into it, but it was more around supporting the methodology that we're using and creating a greater understanding. But with ADR, it's a completely different approach. So as I started to hone my research, especially around things like dyslexia and psychometric testing in recruitment, we found that that was a barrier for my interviewees to secure employment. In fact, one of my interviewees went for a graduate program, didn't get in because they couldn't fulfill the psychometric testing requirements. And then 3 years later, went back to the company and was offered a position 2 levels higher and skipped. So we were like, oh my God. So we took something that started out on paper and a whiteboard to documenting it to processes and procedures to give it some life and bring it to, bring it into the real world, so to speak, and then to digitize it so that, this is something now that can grow legs and go to all the employabilities in Ireland. It can go beyond Ireland, and they're no longer bound by geography, which I'm sure you've experienced. You know, I've seen you a lot on LinkedIn, you know, with all the different forums that you engage with, and it just makes for a wider conversation. And I suppose to finish it off, then there was, I think, 16 parallel initiatives for each of the stages, but a real sort of a bookend, I suppose, for the project was that they're actually going to set up a community of practice now, where that once a quarter they will engage with other stakeholders that we identified, and it's kind of like a lessons learned. What have you done? What's different? So they can start to learn from each other and really set up that out of the process, outside of that realm support network. And it just makes it hugely exciting for myself and the team.
Yeah. So that's very interesting, Brendan. So what I'm hearing is it's sort of the client is the person with the disability. What employability does then is works with employers to try and find appropriate positions for those clients. And what you've done is now, I suppose, looked at that process end to end, recognize that it consists of 7 key stages, and for each of those key stages you've broken it down into different aspects, and you've gone even further again in terms of actually solutioning that 7-stage process using a piece of technology, and that piece of technology now can also be rolled out to other employability offices.
So it was quite intense, but I think what enabled me to do so much in such a short space of time was the turning point from semester 1, semester 2. So with the teaching staff, what we had learned about was design thinking in semester 1, where it was 80% problem analysis, 20% solution. And then there was an almost accelerated shift in our mindset and the tools that we were provided. So we looked at things like design sprints, prototyping, you know, ADR, advanced design research. And really what happened was that the teaching staff enabled us to move from this very much living in the problem world to getting out there and doing stuff and affecting real change. And it was all these different examples that were brought in. We had a load of guest speakers that were brought in to show us how it was done. So we had some really, really great reference points. And through our mentoring sessions then as well, what we found, myself and my project team found that was anytime we went down a rabbit hole, you know, yourself or Bryony or Fiona or Mike were there to kind of pull us back out of the weeds and say, you might be going a little bit off piste here, you know, you need to hone back on this. This is potentially where the nugget is. And, you know, design thinking is hugely exciting, and the course, you know, really, I think nearly everybody took a social project that they wanted to tackle because they were so passionate about it, and they could see the change that they could affect in such a short time. But I suppose just to end on the point is that the teaching staff, I'd more call them coaches, to be honest, our coaches, really what they helped us to focus on was what we could get done in the time that we had available to us. And that really sort of solidified our minds on what our prototypes would be. And that really then enabled a flow of data and information back in. And I suppose my role in all that then was being the central point and trying to culminate the research side of it, as well as introducing them to design thinking, and then getting all of their data and insights.
What intrigues me as well, Brendan, you were working full time during this, you know, and I know there's probably people listening here, you know, that would be saying, is this a sort of a program I could do while I work full time? Have you any sort of tips or advice on how you made it work for you?
Yeah, the only way I was able to make, like, because as I said, I have a dual role, so I'm a director of business development, which, as you can imagine, involves a lot of getting out there, meeting people, lots of calls, Zooms, Teams, all that kind of good stuff, and then a lead innovation consultant. So I'd be running a lot of workshops as well, especially with my previous background in design thinking. So, you know, that's quite a busy day job, as you can imagine yourself. But if I had my time back again, 100% I'd do this program again, because what this program has done for me has enabled me to take a step change in my understanding. of innovation and design thinking. Like, we're very formalized in, you know, in public consumption, everyone thinks design thinking is 5 stages and that's it. And, you know, you go through the stages. Again, they treat it like a process. Whereas with this, it's allowed me to see so much more. Like, I think so to make it work with the day job, what I found really useful was setting up the support mechanisms around the program. So in semester 1, we were put into groups. So every Sunday night, we would have an hour on Zoom or Teams where we get together as a team, and we would leverage off each other, assign accountability, actions, owners. Then 3 days later on Wednesday, we have an hour from 7 to 8, and we say, well, what did you do? Present what you did. And then Thursday evening, we'd use the time to hone and refine our work, and we'd present on Friday then to the rest of the cohort and the teaching team. So that for semester 1 was a real support in how we approached getting our initial project done. For semester 2, as we are talking about today, it was a lot more intensive in the approach and what we wanted to do, but that was self-inflicted because of the passion and, you know, I suppose the main anchor was I wanted to do something. I wanted to be able to turn around at the end of the project and say, for example, if I left this project and I went back to the day job and I never thought about it again, that it would be sustained, that it could stand on its own 2 feet and keep going. So all the time throughout the second semester, it was about having pulse checks with the team, with employability. This is where we are, this is what we're doing, this is what needs to happen next. So building a clear roadmap, and then, you know, using your time wisely. Like, if you have an hour for lunch, you'd have a half an hour quick pulse meeting with employability. You try and schedule at least an hour to 3 if you had the time in the evenings to look at maybe getting some of your research done and so on and so forth. And it's actually not a cumbersome ask. It's actually quite digestible. So if you're, you know, something that's very important at the moment with COVID is getting out and exercising and your mental well-being. So, you know, you can flick on a podcast, you can hear from the experts, and then if that piques your interest, you can search the academic paper, you know, jump right into it, get the reference. But it's about saving, really. It's taking little pieces and saving them over the course of the program. So, you know, at the end, you have this pot of knowledge that you can just pull from, and it's not in the last week you're writing like a banshee trying to get it all done in that time frame. And I felt that in order to have credibility to stand with my peers, I needed to come onto this program. And I felt that this program, because it was this first year, I knew that those behind it would be throwing everything at the kitchen sink at it. You know, we'd be getting a good deep dive into as much information as possible. So I felt, you know, at the end of the program, I'd emerge with a good foundation to move forward with confidence and to speak with confidence and to be able to reference other people's work, what I had seen, what I had learned, and to really broaden my horizons. I got that in spades more. I mean, to be honest, for me, I would have taught, as you mentioned, I was trained by Experience Point and certified by IDEO, and one of the requirements was training 300 people in design thinking, and the organization I worked for at the time experienced millions of dollars worth of savings because of these innovative initiatives. But this program has just been phenomenal in the sense that now I understand that we're all really good at the action stuff and we're really good at the solution stuff. But it's how do you intersect the research, the design, and the action in a focal point that each of the 3 parts are equally influencing the solution. And it's not, oh, I did my research at the start now, push it to the side, that's done, tick, because we have an awful habit in business of going, tick, you know, job done. This was a cyclical approach so that we could continuously, based on the actions that we were doing in the real world, feed that information back. The design, how it was interacting with the client and the users, feed that back. And the research, as the research evolved, like I mentioned, 6 weeks in, I discovered the social model of disability. Had I had that at the very start, it would have been a very different project. But again, feeding that back in, and it's this constant iteration of moving problem formulation solution, and constantly moving around. And I suppose what I've learned from the program is to become comfortable with the uncomfortable. And that's probably one of my biggest learnings from this program, is that it's okay not to have the answer. Just keep pushing on. And to quote one of my other colleagues on the program, my classmates, I suppose, Caroline O'Leary, you know, I thought it was a fantastic quote in her presentation. She was saying, take risks, change happens when you go outside your comfort zone. And I have it written on a poster here on the wall in front of me. So
inspiring, yeah. And Brendan, you talk about maybe not having that maybe university level education prior to this, you know, and I have to also recognize, Brendan, I know you haven't mentioned it, but you were one of the award winners from your class, from your year this year. And I think it was pulling those strands together that you spoke about. I think it was D-Cubed in Action was the award you got for your contribution to D-Cubed in Action. That's bringing data, digital and design together. So I'm not sure if I'm congratulating you or I'm looking for a comment, but it was a spectacular, given the quality of the people in the class, I think it was a spectacular results, really.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like you mentioned, the class came up with some amazing projects. Like I don't envy the teaching faculty on having to, you know, come back and assess. And yeah, I think we handed out 8 awards, wasn't it, on the day. So, you know, stacking up against the rest of my cohort, I was definitely surprised. And design thinking is all about building on the shoulders of other people. You know, someone takes it to level 1, you take it to 2, 3, 4, and so on. But I think it was very clever from the teaching staff in that if you look at each of the award categories, what you've done is you've provided a blueprint for the next cohort of people coming through the program, so that you remove a little bit of that ambiguity and you allow them to maybe jump into that project, connect with that person on LinkedIn or, you know, whatever the case may be, and learn how they did it and what they did. Because as you know yourself, Paddy, you know, speaking to someone and reading it can be 2 completely different things in what, you know, sparks that creativity within your mind for your particular project.
Yeah, and I think it's a very good point as well. Obviously, Brendan, your cohort is the first cohort out of this program, but we're really fortunate to have people that have come through other programs with us previously coming in, talking to us, sharing their insights. But what's really exciting is hopefully, touch wood, you will now be the alumni who will be coming back next year talking about your experiences.
And also, I think what's really been a turning point for me is now I'm kind of hungry to keep learning. So I was a bit apprehensive about going back to college. You know, you're always anxious about the unknown and what you're not familiar with. But I think that the support mechanisms that we've had from UCC have been fantastic. You know, like the Skills Centre, the Writing School, you know, the teaching staff like yourself making time outside of hours to sit down with us and, you know, talk through things that we were going through. So yeah, I definitely don't see this as being the end of my academic journey, you know. So the next step definitely is taking everything that UCC has given me and looking at how I give it to others, and hopefully, you know, inspire similar people like myself who haven't done the 3rd level education piece. You know, I'm 40, I turned 40 when I joined the program, how they can do it too. And it's not so scary, and you can do it. And it's really just about, you know, getting in there, get your hands dirty, and just enjoy it. Just have a bit of fun.
Thanks, Brendan.
No problem.